LCK, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy region done, SKT gone. On the rift as it is in worlds. Give us this year the Western world's chance, and forgive Korea for inting, as we forgive NA for their transgressions against us. And lead us not into hubris, but deliver us from false narratives. For Korea is the elite, the Gosu, and home to Flash and Faker, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, boys, for joining me in prayer. Today, it's Chronobreak episode 5. I'm going to do some quick introductions, and then we're going to jump into some of the narratives and the gameplay and the semifinals. So first, we're going to introduce Izento. Now, Izento is a baller and a hustler, one of the hardest working guys I know. He is actually the League of Legends analogy to Volamel. He works his ass off, he produces some of the best content, and no one knows who the fuck he is. So, it's great.
I just learned about Volamel like 3 months ago, you know? So, that works out.
Yeah, man. It's rough. It's rough here. Look, back in the day, Esports Heaven used to be like the birthing grounds of all the stars and stuff like that. But dude, that juice all wore out, man. You guys got to stay away from this place now. He's actually producing the show though, because look, I'm already pulling my leg here, watching League of Legends. So produce, host, and watch League of Legends. Pick 2, maybe. That's all I got, man.
And that's why all the camera boxes are all fucked up, and like I'm just trying to just nudge it a little bit.
Oh,
we got
you're
rectangles
making...
and squares and all this shit.
You're making a grave mistake. You're assuming that I would fix that or even improve on any of that, or it wouldn't be worse if I was doing it. So don't worry about it. Look, man, I come from China Talk. There was absolutely zero production value there. All right, my expectations, like, they can't possibly be lower. So yeah, give him a follow. He rants existentially on Twitter, so my kind of guy. I always love reading your stuff about life, and it brings me back to my own brain. And
I rant, I complain, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's so relatable. And then we have John. He's been. Do you want me to introduce you as John or Migraine? I actually don't even know. Whatever, man. You're John now. All right.
Yeah,
So John's been with ESH for a few years now. I consider this guy the wild card Nostradamus. He occasionally people actually read his stuff, but most of the time he just writes these like really, really prophetic articles that explain exactly what's going to happen with all the wild card regions and in all the upsets that are going to happen in advance. And then a lot of the times nobody reads them. And then you just see these discussions while he's like internally screaming at himself, like, I told you guys. But no, they're just sitting there on Twitter like, who could have possibly known this was going to happen? Like, who's this Levy guy? He's actually a good jungler? Like, what is this?
See,
like,
Jonathan,
I told you guys.
Jonathan's like that crazy guy, you know, in the corner that is just talking to himself, like, oh yeah, and you know, and this is gonna happen, and I know that this is gonna happen, and they're gonna go and path over here, and you're just that fucking crazy dude. That's just like no one hears you until they start looking at you, and they're just like, wait, is he like predicting the future? Like, what the fuck's going on over there?
See, this is what happens. I come from the future, so, but I can only look at the stuff that nobody cares about. So I can't tell if Korea will win, but I can tell you which Vietnamese team will make it to Worlds this year.
And that's why we get along, man. We both are in love with things that people don't give a shit about. Like, for one, I love Brood War in 2018. And I also love China when nobody was watching. It's great.
Yeah, we just
hipsters of esports right here.
Hey, some things don't change.
All right, so, and then obviously myself, people know me as editor-in-chief of Esports Heaven. People also knew me from China Talk back in the day. Funnily enough, I actually haven't done any League of Legends video content since like 2015, and the times that I did after China Talk were both Korean. So, like, in a way, now that I've introduced the show with, like, a cult like Prayer, it's almost like I have shifted cults, and that's the beauty of cults. A lot of the times, it's not even, like, the belief that people are in love with. It's the extremity of it. So, yeah, just transfer right over. Hop in the bandwagon. It's great. So, yeah, I'm doing a league show in 2018. I kind of know how the game works, but luckily, I don't need to know that much because I got these guys. Great. So... Instead of jumping straight into the semifinal games and doing a boring-ass breakdown, I want to jump into something kind of juicy that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And the topic to start with is, did Fnatic get robbed? And a lot of people might misinterpret this because it's been kind of used in the past in an opposite sense. Like, for instance, say like TSM or your favorite team gets like a group of death, and it's really hard for them to get out, and then they can't show their potential because they can't make it to a stage. It's the exact opposite for Fnatic now. The narrative surrounding them is really interesting because they are basically, most analysts unanimously agree they're probably the best Western team ever produced, and they have gotten to the finals now without fighting any LCK teams at all, even in their group. And on top of that, they also have the narrative they're piggybacking off of the whole Season 1 Worlds whatever argument going on. So there's always going to be that asterisk. What are you guys' thoughts on it? On this? I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat as to what I feel about Fnatic, because while I think that Fnatic can beat any Korean team right now if they had to, basically I think they'll definitely stand a chance against any Korean team, and they'll probably even beat them. But the fact that they're not even being given a chance to beat the old overlords, as it were, and possibly become the new overlords, it's kind of a pity. But what we do have as a consolation is the fact that we get to see IG versus Fnatic again for, I think this will be the fourth, like we potentially get a best of 8 or something crazy like that, because they've already met 3 times in the group stage. So that is juicy in itself. So it's not a big deal. I think in the next few years we'll probably be thinking about that, but it actually wouldn't. It actually doesn't affect their placement too much. I would say.
I don't know. Like in one instance, you say, okay, the Korean teams are like the benchmark in terms of how a team performs, or like how good they are, right? You just measure them up to Korea. But in this iteration of Worlds, I don't think they're necessarily the benchmark. I think Chinese teams are probably the better benchmark when considering how strong a team is, and Fnatic have already done that before, with IG. So to say that they, I guess, aren't going against the old guard or whatever, like, yeah, in one instance that's okay to say, but with this iteration of Fnatic, I think they would have beaten almost any Korean team. Maybe having trouble with KT Rolster, but it's like I still think they probably would have beat them anyways, just because of how different the meta is currently right now, and how like there's it's more about individual laner strength, and then it's about how you team fight. So I don't know, I don't think that just because they didn't go through a Korean team this Worlds it matters too much. But I think when people look at the bigger context of like, okay, Korea has been so dominant for so long, and maybe 3 or 4 years from now, when people look back at this Fnatic run, especially if they win Worlds, right? They'll look back at this and maybe think, okay, well, you guys didn't go through a Korean team because, historically Korean teams have been the best. People will often forget that the meta actually didn't suit the Koreans at this time. So it really, when you look at the context of it, it doesn't matter. But when you look at like the overarching storyline of all the Worlds put together, then yeah, I think people will like forget that. So
yeah, I think what we're losing is really just the symbolism of the old guard switching to the new guard kind of thing. That's pretty much all we're missing, to me.
Yeah, because that's how I felt, and if I'm just living vicariously through the players, it's, you're obviously going to have that initial high of winning Worlds, and they're obviously going to be happy for quite a while. But it's almost like a little bit unfair, even like if you're ignoring the whole historical context as like a fan. As a player, you're always going to have that like, what if like, we did go through the Korean teams, and like, what if would we have been able to defeat the Korean teams that were in our way and stuff like that. And looking back on that, I've always just thought, man, it's kind of like, it's almost an unfair situation for them to be in, because it's not like it's easy to predict that they could have done well, but again, like Izento was saying, like in the broad context of things, like let's say, and if this is very likely, let's say Korea pick it up big time in 2019 and 2020, then in the whole overarching theme of things, it's definitely going to look like they kind of fluked their way to the finals, which obviously wasn't true. But it's always just going to be a hypothetical. We'll never actually know, and I guess that's just a shame of international
The shape of the
competition.
format, really.
Yeah.
I mean, well, and then like if you think about their group itself, it's like okay, well they had 100 Thieves, and then they had G-Rex, and so
IG.
like yeah, and IG. So when you look at also the context of their entire group, it's like okay, well neither of those teams are anywhere near as good as IG or Fnatic, so they kind of had an easy route after groups, and it's I don't know. It's kind of considering that maybe they might have been weaker in best of ones if they were to be in a stronger group, a harder group. But
We will never know.
yeah, we'll just never know, right? And I guess that's what you get when you become a first seed, anyways, right? Is that you have the right to get an easier group because you're the strongest in that group. So it's no real slight to them because they got first seed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. They earned their first seed fair and square. But I think what really threw the semifinals off were just the upsets that happened during the quarterfinals. And the fact that C9 beat Africa Freaks and G2 beat RNG just made the semifinals just seem a lot more lopsided in hindsight. And this was something I was kind of fearing before the semifinals because I kind of knew that yes, Fnatic beat not Fnatic. C9 beat Africa Freaks 3-0. That's really great for C9, but C9 didn't seem to be on the level of Fnatic, and I in the last Chronobreak episode I actually predicted Fnatic 3-0 and they did it. So I kind of saw this coming. So I don't know if Africa Freaks or some other team could have given them a better fight, but I do know that what we did get was probably directly the result of all the upsets that happened during the quarterfinals.
Yeah, and definitely like you definitely saw it in the quarterfinals when we talked about earlier how Koreans are really caught off guard by the meta because it felt like Africa actually over prioritized in that, and Cloud9 or they over prioritized objectives and stuff like that. Well, Cloud9 just pulled the trigger, and pulling the trigger is so heavily rewarded that they moved on. So yeah. I guess I don't have much else to say about Fnatic unless you guys have anything else to add, but I thought it was like an interesting thought experiment to kind of just think about like the overall perception and what this means for Fnatic, if especially these are the only two World Finals they ever get to. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the semifinals then. So, Izento, I'll start with you. IG versus G2. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This was actually probably the worst series I've ever seen, like at least in recent League of Legends. Because here's the thing: it just looked like by the scoreboard and stuff that it was like almost going to be close, but honestly, it just looked like IG doing whatever the fuck they want, and it was always like kind of deceptive. Like it seemed like IG just had full control the whole time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those matches where you're looking into and you're just like, okay, what regions are these? Okay, what teams are these? You know, like it seemed like a pure stomp just from the lane phase aspect. It's like, okay, you have this fucking huge mismatch top lane, and you know, with the Shy wrecking on Jace and shit, and it's kind of ridiculous to think that this type of mismatch can exist. And it's not only in counterpick. Like, yeah, sure, when a professional gets a counterpick, they're expected to win lane, you know, to a certain degree, but to that degree, like, and then to just roll over the enemy team at that point, it's kind of mind-boggling that this can still exist at the very top level of competition. And it's not to say that Wonder is even a bad player either. So it's kind of weird, and especially with Perks too. With Rookie being so dominant as well in the mid lane, you're just like, okay, well, this is also Perks, who is known to be really lane dominant as well, and one of the best mid laners in his region. And then he gets stomped by Rookie, and it's just like, okay, well, like how high is the ceiling in League of Legends itself? It seems like we didn't know what the ceiling was until we saw these guys play. And that's one of the weird and confusing things about this entire series. It's just like you see IG stomping on an individual basis, and you had thought that these EU top laners or mid laners or whatever are really good, and it turns out China is just on another fucking level.
So IG specifically definitely are on another level when it comes to individual talent, and this is kind of how they always played as well in 2018, where they just kind of go with all three laners basically want to start on the opponents. And in China, there's already a huge how do I say this level of talent that's available just because of the huge of the amount of people who play the game. And you have people playing like 20 hours a day and stuff like that. And in such a competitive environment, you're definitely gonna get like some insanely mechanical players. And IG is just the epitome of that to me. Even though two of their laners are Korean, it's just they have this ethos that they'll just style on you no matter who you are. And I don't think there's a team right now who can actually kind of go up to them toe to toe with them on an individual skill basis. But we'll see about that. We'll see about that.
Well, you know, and I think a lot of people were talking about this before. I think Frostgurn had said way back, like a year ago or something, that China would eventually be the strongest region, and it's mostly due to the player base, right? It's just like power in numbers, and that you have this gigantic player base. You have, I don't know how many servers they have. I think it's like 10 or 12 or some shit.
Way more than that. They have over 60 servers.
Yeah. So it's
although
like,
I think most of the pros play on like Ionia, was it?
Yeah.
They have a super server where all the pros and other players, really high elo players from all of the other servers play on. They have this one server.
Yeah. It's like you have to be like Diamond 2 or something in order to get access, or whatever.
Like that. It's basically their super server.
Yeah, and so like when you have something like that, when you have a system to where you can actually cater to your audience and the sheer numbers that it is, and like have this fucking super server and have this gigantic server like Ionia where all the pros play on and everything, it's just like, how do you fight against that? Like what advantage can you eke out that can beat something that just functions on sheer numbers? And eventually they've been able to catch up with their infrastructure and everything like that, so it's been like catch up for them, but we're seeing the efforts, the fruit of their efforts, so
Pay off.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, while we're talking about the individual strength of players, I think a good portion of people thought that Rookie was the strongest like solo laner in the tournament. What do you guys think about the Shy? Because it seemed like he's been kind of styling too.
I don't know. I think the Shy, it's cool to see a team function towards the top lane, because oftentimes in multiple different meta we don't really see the top lane get much action. It's usually always just functions as a tank lane, right? And then you get two tanks like trying to beat up on each other. And so with this meta, it seems as though, you know, anything is viable to carry from any lane, at least solo lane, right? And so you get someone like the Shy, and it's this perfect meta for him to where he can just try and stun on someone as hard as he wants to. And when you get someone like that, like you're in this Flame era, you know, where Flame used to stomp people in lane 2 and get up on CS and everything. And so you have this like resurrection, or you know, this different meta. Yeah, to where it's like, okay, well now play towards your individual strengths, and that's exactly what the Shy is doing. And it's super refreshing to see, you know, when you look at that.
Yeah, so the roles have been more interchangeable than I've ever seen. It's like, for me, it's weird. It's like opening up a time capsule, because in the whole entire era where I covered League of Legends primarily, it was very established mid and top with not as many flexes. Like, there was still flex picks, but it's very obvious what distinguished a top laner from a mid laner. And so, like, the last time I saw that was way back in the day when people flexed AP top and stuff. With that said, like, I wanted to say, like, what did you guys think about the drafting? It feels like G2 had kind of issues with drafts even since the group stage of this tournament, but I think one of the most noteworthy things is they left Jace open as a flex pick. What are your thoughts? Do you think they were just confident because, like, EU does have that mantra of having powerful solo laners.
Yeah,
So they
I
just felt
think
confident against it.
I think I remember reading an interview with G2's coaches, and I think they said that they just left up Jace because he might give them pressure, but they seem confident that they will be able to overcome that pressure. But I think they heavily underestimated the power that Jace had, and coming at Rose as well. That I don't think there were many Jace games at all. I think most people were just like playing Sion and Urgot and on, and for some reason we just weren't seeing Jace, and I think there was just a mentality shift towards towards the end of the quarterfinals where teams just started to flex like crazy, all these crazy picks into the both the mid and top lane, and I think Jace just came out as a something that people forgot about, because this is something weird about League of Legends, and at the highest level at least, is that teams just kind of forget about champions, and people like fans are watching these games and thinking, why are they not playing so and so champion, but and then they'll just be told that, oh yeah, this champion is not in the meta, but what is actually stopping them from picking these champions, right? It's like I don't think there's any justification for it other than, oh yeah, this is part of the meta. And I think the most refreshing thing about Rose so far has been how teams have just been pulling out all these pocket picks out of their hats, and they're trying to explore all of their options, because the meta, there isn't actually a defined meta, so to speak, and it's been evolving so much over the course of those that we are starting to see more and more picks that we haven't seen so far. And yeah, just a bit of a combination of underestimation, and also just teams stop forgetting about champions like Jace.
I don't know. I think the Jace pick in particular is an error from the coaches and the analysts, and it's like, you have to do your homework, like that's really the only particular thing in which like analysts are there for, right? Is that you do the homework, you figure out what picks that the enemy team is good on, or what picks are available to them, and then you just hand that to the coach and the players and say, okay, this is what you should look out for. And it just seemed like they really didn't do their homework in terms of that.
I don't know. I mean, if you looked at the quarterfinals, for instance, Jace wasn't picked or banned even once. So this unless they hadn't seen it in scrims either, I don't think they could have done their homework on the Jace pick.
Well, no, it's the Shy is known as a Jace player, so
yes,
anytime he can pull it out.
He had been playing tanks for so long, like, and you kind of expect, I wouldn't say expect, but you can kind of predict that he might just go for the utility picks again. I don't know. And there's also the fact that Rookie just kind of, although he has this reputation of picking pretty much whatever he wants as a mid laner, Jace is not something you kind of expect.
Yeah. Like the flex, I didn't even know that Rookie could play Jace, so I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But when it's already flexed to mid lane, and you're just like, okay, and that was what happened in the first game, was they just put it towards mid, and then they put Akali as top, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if you know Rookie can play it now, and you already know the Shy can play it as well too, then it's a double ban at that point. So instead, they just let it go through in game 2, and it's just like, okay, so you want to let it go through, yet you know the Shy can play it as well too. So you already know from game 1 that it's a flex anyways. So it just is even a little bit more mind-boggling in that. And then not only that, but you have all these ADC bans that they're trying to do, and it's just like, okay, well, why are you trying to focus on the bot lane when the solo laners are way more of a problem? And I don't know, I think maybe they were thinking like, okay, let's keep our bot lane alive.
That didn't work out too well, did it?
So I mean, and it's not even to say that the bot lane is necessarily a super big weakness with G2 because I mean most people would say that their bot lane is the weak side of their entire team, but they just faced Uzi. So if they can face Uzi and survive, then I'm pretty sure they can face Jackie Love. So
yeah. To be fair though, like that was one of Uzi's worst sets, I feel. Yeah. And then like, okay, well, it wasn't just like him getting caught out and stuff like that, but like it's always such a pain. It was like a painful thing for me to watch, especially like the blind Tristana W invade. Like I don't know. Do you think that was Uzi's fault? Just kind of as a side tangent to be there and die in the series against what was it?
G2.
That was against G2, right? Yeah. Do you think that was his fault? Because like here's the thing, okay, I know we're focusing a lot on drafts and stuff, but I'm basically trying to build up to, do we think there's anything that G2 could have fundamentally done different in their game plan besides just draft to actually win this set? Because I don't want to call G2 versus RNG a fluke, but there was a lot of situations that seemed a little bit lucky, I would say, even for G2 in the quarterfinals.
Are we just gonna go back to the quarterfinals then?
I mean, like I would say, I don't know. I think G2, they played above their level, you know, and everything seemed
in the playoffs in general, or you mean in this set?
In playoffs in general, yeah, but in particular against RNG, it was just like, okay, they're playing incredibly well. They're soaking up pressure in the bot lane, and that just allows Perkz to free reign over the entire team. So in that regard, yeah. And then especially with Jankos too, not doing ridiculous invades or anything, or fucking the entire plan up. It's like, okay, yeah, everyone's playing particularly well. So I mean, I guess in that regard, it's a fluke. In terms of like playing above your normal level, then yeah. But at the same time, RNG they kept trying to do like this meta, which, and this is one of the worlds in which I find that the meta has been discovered incredibly late. Right? It's like normally you see the meta develop after week 2 of group stage, and you know that might be indicative to us not having a break and having people think about the meta in particular, because now there is no break between, you know, week 1 and week 2. It's just straight up, right? But now it seems like the meta has been fully discovered right now in semifinals, and even in quarters it was like still kind of up in the air, and people were kind of gravitating towards the solo lanes. But just this meta is incredibly weird, because this is the first time I think in World's history to where the meta has been like just discovered now so late. So I think that's maybe also a reason why RNG didn't do that great. And then you have to remember too, it's like, okay, well, what if they would have brought Zatai instead?
Yeah, so yeah, I think the time between the group stage and the quarterfinals has played a huge part in why teams like RNG, teams like RNG had such a bad meta read, and you have to recall that they only had 3 to 4 days in which to prepare instead of a week, or even more days. Like I think some goals like the break went on for like 8 days or something. And yeah, when you give teams time to prepare, they get to try out more things. They get to see what works and what doesn't. And I think teams like RNG really didn't have any time to find out whether their plans were actually viable, because I perhaps they've been winning in scrims with what they were doing. They probably didn't have such a hard time in scrims. They probably thought, okay, since this is going well, we'll just bring it out on stage. And they definitely had no backup plan to what they had already shown. And whether Zatai is there or not, I think it is just something that's just going to be hypothetical, because we don't have 7-man rosters at Worlds. But what they could have changed was just the way that they wanted to play, and they didn't change. They changed when they try to change it, they just change it way too late into the series. And I think G2 by then they had already figured out what to do, because they just had more time since the play-ins to kind of figure out what to do. And the time difference definitely play a huge part to me, and probably plays into why the semifinals was such a stomp as well. And because teams had a week to prepare, and we saw all these crazy picks coming out into semifinals as well. And you definitely having a week to prepare as opposed to having 3 to 4 days plays a huge role in how teams eventually come out on stage.
Sure, I think it definitely goes both ways too. Like if G2 definitely didn't only just fail to research that, but they failed to adapt throughout the series as well, at least in terms of picks and bans. So is there anything else we want to say about the series? It seems like G2 is just straight up outclassed. Drafts, gameplay, no matter what. Like maybe their strength in solo lanes just couldn't hold up very well because their counterparts are so powerful. I don't know if there's anything else to add.
I don't know. I think G2 was hyper focused on getting the Alistair away from the Balan. So yeah. It was really strange in that, and then also that they didn't focus on the Tahm Kench in game 1 as well, because we know that Tahm Kench is like their shit, right? That's how their solo laners get ahead, is that you get the Tahm Kench, and then after lane phase is over, it's like, okay, well, now with Tahm Kench you have so much priority in the side lanes because he can ult over to that and help the side laners, right? So it's strange too that they moved away from that as well, and maybe it's because they were so scared of the whole bot lane and Jackie Love being dominant, because Tahm Kench isn't necessarily a dominant lane champion. So, and then if you look at their bans for ADCs, it's like, okay, they were banning lane dominant ADCs as well. So they just had this super concern over bot lane, and they thought their solo laners could handle whatever was put at them, but apparently fucking not. And when you get counter pick as solo laners, it seems like IG just kind of knew exactly what they were doing in that regard too. So it was a strange pick ban overall, but I'm not trying to say that was necessarily the reason why they lost. It's obvious that they just also got outclassed on an individual level too. So
sure.
You could say maybe they wouldn't have lost as hard. I think you could give them that credit, but I think they still would have lost regardless.
The only thing to argue about is whether it could have been closer or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I think we've beaten this series to death. G2 just got outplayed. Pretty plain and simple. There wasn't really any aspects that they did better. So let's just move on to Fnatic versus C9 then. All right. So this set was at least a little bit more fun to watch for me. Just the last set was just so boring and like almost painful in my opinion. This one was still a little bit weird though, because the series opened up with Cloud9 picking Xin, which I'm not an expert anymore, but I'd assume he's probably the best early game jungler, right? But C9 still got pretty fucked up early game, right? And they didn't even really have really bad counter lanes, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you guys think went wrong in this game? I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, so what I thought is that they had this weird priority on having this Xin, Braum, Lissandra picks in the first draft, and that was pretty much their blueprint. They really wanted all these 3 champions, but I don't know. To me, it played a huge part in why they lost the series to Fnatic, because these 3 champions combined, and with these 3 champions combined, it heavily diminishes the amount of damage that you're doing as a team, as compared to Fnatic, who actually drafted 2 solo laners with pretty high damage bursts, as well as good scaling, in the case of Victor. And when just going by firepower, which is I think it's something that's a bit underrated in when we talk about drafts, is that Fnatic just have way more upfront burst. than C9 in the whole series. And it seemed like the C9 were not only gimping themselves by having this priority drop in draft, they were also handicapping the amount of damage that they could do in whether it be during the laning phase or during team fights. Because if one of your solo laners is not doing damage, you're pretty much relying on the AD carry to do the damage. And as we're seeing more and more, the AD carry is just not the focus anymore. The AD carry is more of a seconds, like to me, is even on the level of a second support, where yes, it's great if they do well, but they're definitely not going to be the sole factor in determining whether a game is won or not. And I think C9 definitely dropped the ball when it came to what they prioritized in draft.
I don't know. I didn't have a problem with their draft necessarily, because I think the Echo into Victor is like, it's a pretty smart idea. Like I don't know how that matchup goes, but I would assume it's like, okay, well, you're able to actually clear the wave pretty good, especially when you get your first item as Echo. I think you should be able to kill the casters in with your Q. I think it's his Q. Whatever.
Okay, so,
timeline, right?
Basically, Echo is a lane counter to Victor, but mostly in the mid lane, because you don't see top Victor very often, and they're probably thinking, okay, Echo is a counter to Victor. Let's try that out. And I think the idea is there, but I think it was a combination of Repo just being really good at Victor, because if I'm not wrong, he was a Victor main in season 7 or something crazy like that. He played, yeah, he did, and so he's really skilled on the champion, and it's a like, I wouldn't say it's a matchup that he's confident in, but I think Licorice definitely isn't gonna have as much practice on the Echo as Repo does on the Victor. So even if it were a counter, I think that sort of plays a part as well, because I think in the early game, Licorice did have a bit of an advantage over Repo. From what I could see, he was actually harassing him out of lane pretty frequently, but I think it just fell apart a bit later on when they couldn't keep up with what Fnatic were doing.
I don't know.
Do you guys think Licorice lived up to his like, you know, his reputation? Because I know everybody on Twitter was pretending that they knew he was the shit like all year. So I'm just curious about that.
He was the shit compared to Impact. I'm pretty sure that's what they were judging him on, like him compared to Impact on Z9. And of course, like, yeah, he did look better because he could play carries, but I don't know, obviously there's a lot of overhyping when it comes to the NA region, when it comes to their players, but I don't think he's a bad player, no, but it didn't seem like it was a 1v1 kind of thing to me. It's just not.
I mean, I think everyone was kind of hyping up this matchup in particular, right? Because it's both the rookies. So in terms of just micro, I think it's difficult to judge when you look at micro for players, because there's no replays, so you can't actually look at the lane phase entirely and exactly what they're doing with their champions in particular.
Season 8, by the way.
Yeah, man, we need those lane specific streams. I can't believe that's not the norm now, because they experimented with it in the past, and I don't know, man.
It's so weird, right? Because I mean, even in Counter-Strike 1.6, you have demos to where you can look at a particular player's point of view. And
Brute War had replays.
Yeah, and we don't even have that shit. So.
Like till 2001 or so, but you know, we got it eventually.
Yeah.
I don't have the technology there, okay guys.
Like in particular, that top lane matchup, I think in the first game it actually wasn't going too bad until Svenskeren decided to like do this panic play, because Broxah just had more pressure in terms of like securing first blood and everything, and so it seemed like Svenskeren was just panicked to make a play. So he just does this gank top lane, And it's not the fact that he like inted into the tower and everything. Like yeah, that's bad. But it was also like, if you look at the replay, you could see that LeBlanc and Lee Sin were going top lane anyways, right? They were doing a flank, so he was dead regardless. But it's like, well, then just don't do that play if you see that they're invading your jungle to go do a flank. Or maybe even just blow his flash, and then after that, just peace out. And I still think they probably could have gotten away at that point. But it seemed as though Svenskeren like got into like his panic phase of just like, okay, well, I need to do something, you know, because I feel really useless and I have this early game jungler, and yet Lee Sin just has more tempo than me. So, and you kind of have seen this historically from Svenskeren when he gets into like these high pressure matches, is that it feels like he just needs to try and make a play, and then he like does these weird invades, or he gets caught out or something, and he doesn't play characteristically to what he normally does. And that's what it seemed like with this series itself too.
Yeah, I kind of agree that it wasn't a move that he should have done in the first place. And this probably has more to do with the champions that were in play. Like top Victor on blue side is apparently it's pretty difficult to gank unless like Victor is way pushed up into the turret. But most of the game it wasn't like that. He was able to control the lane. And pretty much it prevented Sven from getting a jump on him. So yeah, I think the fact that it was a losing 2v2 matchup, and the fact that he was rapidly losing tempo, probably forced him into these sort of situations. And yeah, it's I guess part player problem, part draft problem. It's a bit combination of factors.
All right, let's jump into game 2. This one was weird for me because I understand that bot's a lot more flexible than it used to be in the day with like mages and stuff like that, Heimerdinger and whatnot. But it still hasn't been very popular. And Sneaky went ahead and picked Victor. Do you guys think this was like kind of like an emotional pick? Like, do you think they would have done this if the series was going better at the start, or do you think this was like actually something they had planned? Because it didn't seem to work so well at all, and they even got first blood with Spencer, and it seemed very inconsequential. What do you think, Izento?
This is completely reactionary. This is completely emotional. I think what happened was Dylan, the coach, just backed Reaper into a corner. It's like, okay, you pick Victor and then you pick Aatrox, and you're just like, haha, like, what are you gonna do now? I got you. And then they pull out the Jace, and it's like, oh fuck. Okay, neither of those matchups are good into Jace. What do I do? Oh god. And then he ends up picking Lissandra in the second rotation, and so he tries to balance it out. It's like, okay, Sneaky, you're pretty good on Victor, right? Like you
like,
play this champion.
Like, sure. He's like, sure.
Like, yeah, sure. I guess. And
I guess.
It's not as though the actual game went that bad in terms of like the early lane phase. I thought it actually went pretty good, all things considered. But but it seemed like they got backed into a corner, just from the draft phase in particular.
Okay. Any additional thoughts, John?
Yeah, Victor is definitely. I can't say it was planned. It just seemed like something they had to take away from Fnatic because they had no options left. And I think what Fnatic did really well in this game was that they identified what C9's crush champions were to use a term that C9 had a bunch of champions that they relied on, specifically the Nocturne, the Nocturne Zilean. To an extent, Alista picks as well. They pretty much banned these 3 champions for all 3 games, and I think it worked super well because these are pretty much the champions that C9 rely on a huge amount. And even though they didn't have to use those champions a lot to win against the Africa Freaks, Fnatic were obviously they had the superiority in terms of solo laners as well, that it all you had to do was remove the champions that were particularly annoying, and then pick the really OP champions yourself. So the Fnatic, you just had the ability to pick more champions than C9 did the entire series. So it's like Cloud9 were playing with maybe 3 cards in their deck, and Fnatic at 7 to 8. That with that sort of handicap, I think C9 just were at a disadvantage going into the series.
See, and that's also another thing, is that, okay, cool, you have this pocket pick Zillion, or you have this pocket pick Nocturne, but what people often forget is that a pocket pick is only good when, first, if you can get it, and then second, a pocket pick is great because it draws out a ban, and then you get the OP picks after that, right? Like that's the whole thing with like Aurelion Sol with Huhi, and that he draws that ban out, and then okay, so now CLG can actually get these other OP picks that are meta. Well, with Cloud9, it's like, okay, if you guys didn't practice any of the OP picks, then they can just ban you out anyways, and then you have to ban the OP picks, so you don't even get those. So they constantly banned what was it, Akali and Aurelia. Yeah. So if you have to ban those constantly, then like how good are your pocket picks? Then you just have to end up banning everything out, and then you're left with all these shit picks. So it just seemed like they were handicapped entirely by focusing on these pocket picks or these pocket strategies, and then they had nothing left in their playbook.
Okay. All right, so I think we more or less covered game 2. Unless anyone has anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, other than I think Cloud9 actually played the early game well, in terms of bot lane actually had a ton of pressure with that Victor pick, but what was weird was that they decided to rotate everyone mid lane, like in the middle of the game or something, or not really middle, but like towards the end of the lane phase. For some reason, they just decided to rotate everyone mid lane, and then they let Reckless get bot tier 1, and so they were just completely outclassed in terms of macro decisions itself. So I'm not really sure that you could say the picks were at fault for game 2. I think it was more just based upon macro decisions and how they just decided to randomly ARAM it up like NA always does.
The NARAM.
So it's super weird that Cloud9, they didn't decide to keep the map split up and just let their bot lane get pressure and then eventually make a play bot lane, because I mean you have 2 teleports, so you can decide to do a bot lane play and you'll automatically have more people there than they will. So I don't know, I thought that was incredibly strange. Like it's weird because yeah, there is this weird mentality of North American teams just gravitating towards mid no matter what, and I think like it's just this weird obsession that you saw in this game, which completely botched any entire advantage that Cloud9 had, which was in their bot lane. So it was just super weird.
All right, well, let's segue into a game where Cloud9's bottom lane didn't do well early. So yeah, this was like catch-a-thon, man. It was just like Cloud9 getting caught at the worst times all over the place, and then they tried to counteract it by denying the bottom lane of Fnatic. It was like looking like one of my solo queue games back in the day where there's like 7 people in between tier 1 and tier 2, and I'm just trying to get some CS, man. Woo, it was rough. All right, so at this point, I think Cloud9 was probably just shaken up. What do you guys think? Because honestly, it just seemed like at the worst high-stake moments of the game, there was just a pick-off, and then Fnatic took a lead, a pick-off, Fnatic took a lead. Do you guys have like a different perspective on this, or was it pretty straightforward?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
They definitely could have. They should have had the balls to change something up by the third game. They were playing, I think, too media. They kind of being way too reactionary, and I don't know. It's considering the way that Cloud9 got here, which is basically they just played however they wanted to, and with their own style. It seemed like they really got shook by the previous 2 games, and it seemed there was a mentality issue where by the time the game got to game 3, and I didn't see much like the game. The game itself was of course nothing special, nothing remarkable. If anything, just kind of had their way, and it's hard to like we're not talking about in-game VOD right now, so we don't have to talk about like full they did this, they made this mistake here, so they did. But since we're just talking about, we're just kind of going with broad strokes. We can kind of say, we can kind of infer that they probably had some kind of mental breakdown and they just reverted back to the picks that they had in game one, which didn't work out.
I don't know. So the draft for this game didn't make much sense to me towards the end, because it's like, okay, you're picking a Braum Lucian for Cloud9, right? And then they first picked Qingjiao. So it's like, okay, if you're going for this early aggression and everything, then they allow Rakan to be picked in like the first part of the draft phase, and then they don't ban Xayah, which they banned Xayah in the second game, right? To take away from the lovers duo. So like, okay, if you're playing for this early aggression with Braum and Lucian, then why would you not ban Xayah in the second phase? Instead of they ban Jax and Lee Sin, right, for the second part for Cloud9. It's like, okay, if Jax is supposed to be this counter to Qingjiao, then it's like, okay, ban that, that's fine. But it seemed as though they were scared of the early aggression for Broxa with his Lee Sin, so they decided to ban that instead of the Xayah. But then your bot lane is neutralized on what you tried to get like within the draft phase itself. So it's just super strange to see that draft work out. But not only that, it's like, I mean, you can't fuck up with like that mechanical mistake where Sneaky goes in front of the feathers and everything. It's like like how are you going to mess up on one of the most simplest things, you know, when it comes to a Xayah lane? So
too much Fortnite, man.
Yeah, there's just too much fucking Fortnite, you know.
I know, if the Fortnite got them to semifinals, I don't think it's right to blame it now.
No, yeah. That's actually something I wanted to just address real quick before we close out the actual set, is like, just if you guys have any final thoughts on Cloud9, because like honestly, for any shit we give them and stuff, like they had a fucking fantastic run if you consider where they started at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of summer to now. Like it's just actually crazy how far they got, and they seem to be able to do this like every year. It's fucking crazy.
What I'm most impressed with is just the way they're able to adapt to whatever circumstances they're faced with, and the fact that Reaper just used the roster to the fullest extent as well. Just not like he just carved out these small advantages that work so well against any teams who generally don't really try to do things like this. And these sorts of advantages are just like, I just wish more teams in NA would do this. Like they can't just stick to whatever, like stick to rigidity and playing like the best. And Cloud9 just issues that sort of mentality outright, and they've done well at Rose every single time. So yeah, I just wish teams would learn from what they're doing and perhaps be more dynamic in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seemed as though Cloud9 got away with largely draft advantages for the most part. Like their entire season, it just seemed like they got away with draft advantages, which is cool if you want to set. That's
a pretty bold chalk up, man, for a whole season.
Yeah, I like that. Like the fact that they don't have the best players, but they do have really good drafts. It's just, and they manage to win. Is actually cool. It speaks to how much influence the coach has.
Yeah,
and that is something I really wanted to see at the start of the year as well, when NA started getting all these coaches in. They got Prawley in, they got so like Song and so many other coaches from different places, and then you see like, and then obviously there's Reaper, and I want to see how they will face off. And like, yeah, I think Reaper has such a big influence on how this C9 team has performed.
Just on the Reaper note, it's like, you don't get coaches like Reaper just because the NA orgs, they seem to limit the power from the coaches themselves. And well, that's not even just NA orgs, that's just orgs in particular. And we've been in this era of being player run in terms of teams, because it's like, okay, well, with relegations, you kind of have to have, you know, they have to have their way, or else then you just get relegated, right? I mean, that was like when Double F joined Team Liquid and how he saved them from relegations. It's like, okay, you're in their mercy at that point. So
they were not being coached at the time, yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to try and discipline your players when you're about to get relegated, that's like good fucking luck. So I think with Academy being brought in and everything, and how you have these substitutions that are available, like this brings more power to coaches themselves, which is great.
If you want to give it to them.
Yeah. If the orgs want to give it to them, and that's all that it relies on, right? And when you have an org like Cloud9, which invests power in their coach, then you get things like Reapered. And I'm not trying to say that every coach can become Reapered if you just give full reign to the coach themselves, but there has to be a start or an initiative to be able to get coaches that become like Reapered. Yeah, you have to allow them to try. So,
well, how do you think this wave can happen though? Because I think it's just a cultural hierarchy problem.
I mean, we already have franchising, and there is no fear of relegation. So, what is the fear? Like the best, the worst. Okay, at worst, you're just gonna get memed on Reddit. Like, oh my god, your 10th place, you're memed on Reddit. But if you have a long-term plan and you allow a coach to have a long-term vision for how his team wants to play and how the team wants to be run, then you should be allowed. You should not be afraid to be 10th place or 9th place or not getting to playoffs once or twice. And if you're gonna be too afraid of backlash and stuff like this, you'll never get anywhere. So just don't be afraid. Just fuck the backlash. Do what you think will make your team succeed in the long run. And there is time for this as well. Like, you're not gonna get relegated.
Yeah, I think the teams are a little bit too influenced by social media and Reddit or Twitter or whatever, and you have to consider, it's as far as traditional sports goes, we are more connected with the fans themselves than any other sport has really ever been, right? Like, you have these social media followings on Twitter, or, you know, these interactions of pros going on Reddit. And so, and then not only that, but streams too. So when you do a Twitch stream, it's like you get to interact with all of your fans and everything. So there's this super connected bond when it comes to players or coaches or teams themselves to the fan base. And so when they do some particular edgy move, you know, and benching someone, they definitely feel it because they're in that space constantly. And I think that's something which teams need to move away from, especially considering how fan bases are always going to be like short-sighted. They're always going to look at the now, right? And they're going to comment on the now, because that's what sports is all about, right? Is about just looking at the current season or whatever is going on, and just to get entertained at that moment. And so if you're a team, though, that's not how you should view the game itself. You shouldn't be so short-sighted and follow these social media like outbursts and everything from the fans. It's that you have to, this is your team. Like, you guys are here for the long haul. So I don't know. I think teams are too hyper-focused when it comes to like immediate gains, and you even saw the backlash of Cloud9 when they benched their players. It's like, oh, what are you doing benching Sneaky and Jensen? Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, and all the fans were up in arms about that shit, but it's like, no, fuck them. Like, just don't even pay any consideration to that. Do whatever you think is best for your org, because you're going to be around for this long time, you know, with franchising. So you need to invest in your future rather than pay attention to whatever fucking fan 5298 on Reddit says.
Jack MVP, man.
Sure.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna move the topics along a little faster here because the pacing's a little off. So the next topic I want to make is, when I look at it from a logical level, it seems a very simple question. But if you look at it broader and probably a little bit more emotionally from my side, just because of the historical precedent set from StarCraft and whatnot, the topic is Korea dead? And basically it's that, or did the meta shift create a fluke? Now, logically, when I'm just talking about the players, it's kind of obvious that more than likely Korea is not only going to have the drive of revenge to want to do better next year, but they'll adapt to this should the meta stay this way and get really good at this play style and dominate. Now, I'm not really as concerned from a player perspective on Korea doing well after this. For me, it's like if you look at StarCraft 2, they still have the best players in the world in Korea, but after like the game started slowing down a little bit and then Korea like had some foreign competitors, it was more like an investor problem. Like there's just like if you look at the top Korean players in StarCraft 2, the orgs are just like they either just don't even have them, or they're just like Western orgs you never heard of. It's fucking wild right now. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I kind of want to like think about the future a little bit for Korea. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Start with you, John.
I'm feeling pretty optimistic about Korea in 2019. Mostly because I was watching the relegation matches, not relegation, the promotion matches for LCK in spring, which I think they'll finish a few weeks before, and we have two new teams in the league, and both of these teams are actually pretty explosive. No, I wouldn't say explosive, but they're teams with young rookie talents in the vein of Griffin, and Griffin, as we all know from summer, was a team that really shook up the LCK in 2018 because they came straight out of Challenger. They shot straight up the standings in summer, and they came into the playoffs in first seed from Challenger, and that is almost unheard of in Korea because Korea is such an entrenched kind of this entrenched sort of a hierarchy among Korean teams, in that so you have the Casper teams in SKT, KT, and then you have the next level, which is Kingzone, Genji, and then you have and the next tier is actually like teams like Africa and Gine, and especially Africa, they were not meant to do so well. They were not seen as a team that would be this good in 2018, but that's something that we'll come into later. Griffin, on the other hand, were just like the team that was just monstrous when it came to how much they wanted to win, and just how they approached the game. It was pretty different from all the other Korean teams that we've seen before, and I think just the fact that we might have two new teams who might shake up the league in the same way that Griffin did, I think it gives me a lot of optimism for how Korea will evolve in the next year. They've probably already seen that they can't keep playing this slow style that they have been relying on for so many years, and with less teams like BBQ and MVP, who no disrespect meant to them, but they were always in the lower echelons of the LCK, always close to being relegated. They've even been relegated multiple times, and they never added much to the league. And whatever you want about a promotion system, but when you get teams like Team Battle Comics and Dalwon Gaming and Griffin, when these types of teams come along due to promotion, I think that is a very good case for having promotions. And I know that it's not always going to be like this, and this is probably a special case, but this is probably going to be a new evolution in how the LCK is going to be for 2019.
I don't know, and I was thinking about this the other day of like how there's so much high variance within League of Legends right now. And I did a video on this a while ago, and it was about how why Korea sucks at this Worlds. And I think it's mostly due to the vision itself and how there just isn't as much vision in the game as before. And if you think of just the general playstyle of Korea itself, it's that they have always been about taking the most calculated risk possible, right? And lowering risk. And the way that you lower risk is by vision and making sure that you know exactly where the enemy is. And so if you can lower risk, then suddenly you play a lot more calculated. And that's been Korea's style for forever, right? Mm-hmm. And when you change something so fundamental which is the vision system itself, and you keep constantly changing it. And first it was what you remove green wards, right? Like way back, right? So you remove green wards, and so now you don't have a support that's basically a vision bot. And so, okay, now you implement Sightstone, and it's like, okay, well, now everyone can buy Sightstone, so it really doesn't change the vision game that much. It just changes
Jungler
the power.
buys Sightstone.
Yeah, and then you get the jungler buying Sightstone. So you even probably have more vision. So, okay, they then change the vision system to where, all right, let's have this jungle item, and then let's limit the vision to only supports being able to get this Sightstone or support item. It's like, okay, so you do that, and you're able to then try and reduce vision that way, and it somewhat worked. But you still had the jungle item, and then they suddenly removed the jungle item, and so now there are no more crutches in terms of getting vision on the map. And this has fundamentally changed the way that Korea plays. And so I'm not sure even next year if Korea will be like this awoken beast, I guess, that everyone is assuming, because you have to change your playstyle so drastically now. And with so much high variance within the game, because you're making less assured plays, it's not guaranteed that Korea is necessarily going to be this strong region again, because once again there's more variance within the game. So now you're relying just upon pure mechanical skill, which China can compete with Europe can somewhat compete with, and you know, NA is just fucked anyways, no matter what. But it's so no, I don't think actually Korea will necessarily be back next year. I think there's just too much change that happened within the game, and unless Riot somehow reworked the vision system, like I don't think Korea will just suddenly be back.
So who do you think is gonna be? Who do you think is gonna be on top then, if not Koreans?
I think it probably will be China, because I mean, you go back to how many, like, their sheer numbers, and with the Korean system, it's like, okay, you have these sister teams, and they still have them, like they've been having academy systems for forever, right? Like, it goes way back even to StarCraft, where you have to fight for the #1 spot because it was a solo game, right? So it's the same thing with their solo queue itself. It's like this weird like hodgepodge academy system to where everyone is fighting, and just because there are so many people, like, you have to fight for your main spot because there's some mechanical prodigy like fucking Abel, you know, who's like this ridiculous guy who everyone thought was a scripter. And you know, so yeah, it's bound to happen, I think, within China, that if the game continues to be about just mechanical ability, then China wins out just by sheer numbers.
I want to add a little bit of context to the StarCraft thing, by the way, since there's such a sheer number of high quality competitors. Something that added to this that's also kind of analogous to Chinese League of Legends is like all the backup players and stuff they have, because a lot of these orgs are just like clubs. In StarCraft, you could be extremely good, like one of the highest ranked players in IC Cup and all that stuff. But even then, you'd get into a team and they wouldn't play you for like a live broadcast for like a year or two sometimes. You just have to practice in the team and show what you can do within the team. So like the bar for entry to even like show yourself and just like, you know, kind of represent your org back in the day was absolutely crazy. So yeah, I think you might be onto something with China kind of heading in this direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of just being able to produce mechanical prodigies, China has this inherent advantage, and so you have to try and circumvent that somehow. And for the longest time, Korea has been able to do that just by being cerebral about the game itself. And then when you just go to like this solo queue status, and that's not really to take anything away from the teams, and I'm not trying to say that the game has necessarily been dumbed down, which to some extent it has, because you have to make macro decisions that are based upon less information, so you're making like more guesses more than anything. And so if all the teams are now making more guesses. It's like, all right, well, everything is just less calculated to an extent. But yeah, I just think that China has the edge in terms of if the game is going in this direction, which, I mean, we never know because it's fucking Riot, and they'll probably just change everything up next season anyway.
That's the problem.
Yeah, certainly. It's really hypothetical. It's hard to actually say because you never know when the game is going to say or change. Sorry, I will say that I think I kind of disagree with you, just because, like, yeah, for League of Legends, I think it's actually a disconnect in regards to Korea versus other games that Korea participates in, where in the others it wasn't necessarily like their cerebral strength and ability to work off of information. With a few exceptions, it was a lot more their mechanical ability and their work ethic towards just playing whatever the proper game is. So I think if the proper game stays the way it is for an entire season, then the Korea will be on top again, or at least very close with China. Whereas if it's just like this for spring and then it shifts again, then that's going to put Korea at more of a disadvantage. And as far as the whole organizational bit, where I was kind of bringing up StarCraft examples, that was a little bit of a soft pitch because I just wanted to kind of gauge your guys' opinions on that. I honestly think they'll be fine just because the historical precedent in Korea is that they've been able to operate really successful teams without orgs. You had the Tigers, Griffin for a while. So yeah, I don't think that's going to be so much of an issue for Korea. I think there's still so much interest, and plus the game is just so huge there. It's kind of like too big to fail, so to speak. Whereas StarCraft 2 was never actually really popular in Korea, much to the dismay of many StarCraft 2 fans who refuse to accept that reality. Anyway, yeah, all right, so I think we more or less covered that topic. I still think Korea might be fine, but I think you bring up a lot of good points. I really do think China is just going to keep getting better and better, though. But I've been saying that for 4 years, man. Like, you have to understand I have some skepticism here. Like, I've heard so stupid saying this.
Only been this year that China's really started to show their potential as well.
Yeah. All right, so just real quick, I'm not going to go too in-depth with this, just like some background on what you guys' thoughts are and why for finals prediction and score. So go ahead, Izento. What do you got for the finals predictions?
Oh, man. I want to say that Fnatic seem like this really strong team in terms of just overall gameplay.
Go for it. Be confident. Go for it. Say what you really think.
But IG, dude, their solo laners are just fucking ridiculous. Like, as long as they end up getting counter picks and they keep playing towards the level that they've already shown, I think they're gonna edge it out, and it's probably gonna be a 3-1 IG.
3-1 IG. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say 3-1 Fnatic. And of course I'm going to have an elaboration on this, besides the fact that there's this copy pasta going around where Vedius started, he made a tweet about Fnatic 3-1 and everyone just started copying him for no reason, but I think there was a lot of thought put into that analysis, and I'm not just going to say that I agree with it, but that I believe that even though Fnatic may be slightly behind in the solo lane department, especially Rookie versus Caps, I actually think Rookie is better than Caps, and he showed as much during all 3 games that Fnatic play against IG. So despite this, Caps is not the main focus of Fnatic. It's not even to say that there's someone else being the main focus. It's just the sheer fact that Fnatic have not only 3 laners who can pop off whenever they want, they also have Broxah, who is pretty much the X factor in my opinion, especially for this series, because Broxah versus Ning, Broxah wins hands down. And the way that Broxah plays is that even though he's kind of a resource hog in a way, he kind of wants to take all the kills. He's pretty greedy, kind of like a Levi, but with actual good solo laners, which has actually proven to be an insane approach to playing the game. And Broxah has been looking super good, and that's partly due to the fact that Caps is actually giving up some of his resources to Broxah and Caps has actually gone through an evolution where he used to want to win lane and stomp on his enemies all the time, but now he actually knows when to play safe. He knows when he has a disadvantage and tries to and just holds back, and he doesn't mind being down 10-20 CS as long as he can hold on. And he has players like Broxer behind him who can. He's not actually some people think Caps is actually relying on Broxer as a crush, but I think it's the opposite. Caps is actually facilitating Broxer's insane map pressure, and by giving up his lane priority a little, he actually allows Broxer to come in and get really come in and get the map pressure, kills, ganks, and everything else. It just snowballs from there. So there's also another factor in that if you're banking on either Reckless or Jackie Love, I would definitely pick Reckless 10 out of 10 times, just because Reckless has a way better track record to me. And compared to Jackie Love, see, Jackie Love is he has this curse of Game 5 in China, and he's only been at roles where he's actually started to win best of 5 games. So I wouldn't consider him reformed yet.
Look, you just have to avoid Game 5. That's just it. You just don't even get to Game 5. You just beat them in 4.
That's the basis of a prediction then. I 3-1 Fnatic. Yeah, but
yeah, I don't know. I think with the Shy just being in super top form now, and especially with how aggressive Bwipo plays too, I think the Shy can actually punish that aggression itself. Because if you're going toe-to-toe in terms of mechanics and everything, the Shy is unmatched. So if you're going to play super aggressive and constantly be on the aggressor side, and I don't think Bwipo has necessarily lost a lane, I want to say, throughout this entire Worlds. So if you think about just how Bwipo will then need to change his playstyle if he loses lane, I don't think he's able to actually do that. I don't think he's able to function in terms of that. And then if you have Bwipo losing lane and then say they win that game and they smash top lane, well then do you bring in Soaz, who hasn't played a game in a while, or do you just keep going with Bwipo? And so we haven't actually seen that emergency sub yet, and I'm not sure if Fnatic are actually prepared to even function on a different level than they normally have with Bwipo. So that considered, I don't think Fnatic are actually ready to change up their game plan at all. And if their top lane collapses, I think the entire team collapses itself.
Really?
So, and that's, like, Ning doesn't even necessarily play towards top lane that heavily either. He plays towards mid lane. And with Rookie and Ning versus Broxah and Caps, it's like, okay, well, if Rookie gets the counter matchup, I think he might be able to facilitate Broxah then himself too, and then that gets an advantage top lane, just solo versus solo. So,
all right, cool. Well, I'm not as well informed, so my prediction is largely meaningless. So what I'll say, just kind of maybe from a psychological perspective, is I think domestically Invictus Gaming hasn't really seen a lot of high pressure situations that they've done well in terms of like grand finals and stuff like that. I think Fnatic actually beats them out in experience here, and I think that I'm going to go with 3-1 Fnatic. I think they're also like the diligent example of the West, and they're really like they've proven that they've gotten so much better under pressure. Like you can tell just from in the semifinals how they played around Baron and stuff like that, that they're a lot more comfortable in these kind of situations. And I think that they're like they will know when to swap and toggle between playing safe and when to take advantages, and they've been doing a really good job at pulling the trigger. I don't necessarily think they're the better team, but I think that if you include the psychological element, they might be there. But these are all like fantasy hypotheticals. What'll actually happen is a reverse sweep. Like, you know, IG goes up 2 games, and then they're all just sitting there sad and pressured, and, you know, Soaz slow walks up to the stage. He's like, Bwipo, listen, son, you've done so good. You've done so good for being a rookie, but let Daddy take care of this, man. I got the experience. Let Daddy take care of this. You just want to pick him up, put him to the side, and then lock and blitz crank 3 games in a row. Bam! Literally grab the world title away from IG. That's how it's going to go. All right. So before we close the show out, I wanted to do one little side segment, and I kind of want it to be about this like big work ethic talk around the whole like Fortnite memeing and stuff like that around Worlds. Now that we've seen the results kind of accumulate and stuff like that, so it all started from, I think it was an I Will Dominate tweet about how many games of Fortnite was being played and something like that. And Cloud9 still managed to make it to the semifinals. They actually beat Afrika Freaks, which is kind of interesting in this argument, given the fact that that is the hardest working team that we know of, where the I Love Oov's kind of philosophy around the game is just working extremely hard. And Fnatic also had put in about double the work in terms of solo queue games as Cloud9 and stuff. And like I was saying in the past discussion point, a lot of people consider them kind of like the diligent experts of the West. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think there's merit to it? Do you think that had an effect in the outcome of the games, or do you think people are like kind of overplaying this? I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, I think the hard work thing is versus Fortnite thing is really when it comes down to it, isn't it just it's just a cultural thing. Like obviously Korea is just a society where you just can't stop. If you stop for even a moment, someone else will come over and take away your spot. In North America, there's just almost no chance of that happening. You pretty much most players are pretty stable, have a stable career as long as they're famous enough. It's only been this year that we've really seen players like Sneaky and Johnson really feel threatened in their spot, because I think Reaper was definitely right in that players like Sneaky and Reaper probably getting complacent with how things were, and they pretty much, I'm pretty sure they were taking their spot for granted. And if we were not for that kick in the ass that they received through the benching, I really don't think they would have even made roles. So but at the same time, I really don't think that North America would just magically become really good if they start playing 20 hours a day. Just first of all, the players are just not gonna want to do it, and if they don't want to do something, you just can't force them to do it. Secondly, it's just health issues aside. I think no matter how much you play this, there's only so much you can do, and we saw kind of the logical conclusion to working really hard with lesser skilled players in the case of Afrika Freaks, who I don't think are exactly the strongest mechanical side. Even through all the practice they had, they were still inferior to what C9 to the C9 players in game. So there is definitely a lot kind of a plateau you can reach with hard work alone. You definitely need this both a combination of hard work, talent, and just knowing your own strengths as a person, and also how you function as a person within your own culture. So you can't just take someone else's culture and make it your own. North Americans shouldn't be thinking if only I could work or if only we had players who could work 20 hours a day. That's not going to be realistic. You just have to work with what you have and develop your own strengths. That's just how it's going to have to be for North America, in my own opinion.
Okay, Izento?
So we have two examples of incredible hard work, which is Fnatic and then Afrika Freaks, right? And so you could say in one instance that, well, if you do so much hard work like Afrika Freaks, it doesn't really matter because you lose anyways. And then you go towards Fnatic and it's like, well, if you do hard work, then you get to the world finals, right? So there are two different modes, I guess. And to say that hard work, if you put in the hard work, you're able to actually achieve something great. Well, yeah, but at the same time, you kind of need this work-life balance. But also, that's to consider this meta itself and how it's very important, the lane phase in the early game. And so if you aren't actually putting in the work and you aren't doing your solo queue, then you aren't able to practice these picks, you aren't able to be at a good mechanical level, and then you aren't able to take advantage of lane advantages. So I think this meta in particular was really important to do a grind and to do solo queue. And with Cloud9 themselves and how they showed that they couldn't even play Akali or Aurelia, that's just indicative to not putting in the work when it comes to solo queue. because that's how you get good at picks in particular, and then you could bring it out in scrims. So it seems as though hard work actually did have a large effect on this Worlds. And I think with the whole mentality of the American mentality or the Korean mentality, I think hard work usually wins out almost every time. So,
because here's the problem I have with the philosophy is the I don't know, it just seems almost hypocritical. Is like, all right, first off, I want to preface this with saying that I don't think like the Korean work ethic, so to speak, is like the ideal way of doing it. I think the obvious answer is you need a balance, but if you want a nuanced discussion about it, it's about kind of calibrating that balance. But the thing is, like, so many people that talk about overworking and stuff, and how that's unhealthy mentally, like, a lot of those people are some of the most unhealthy people I know. Like, it's ridiculous. And a lot of the people I know that are really, really, you know, invested in their work and stuff, like, sure, they're stressed out, but they're not, like, depressed and all this other stuff. Like, just to get philosophical for a second, like, a lot of the times people, like, we're really a goal-oriented species, you know? So if you're just sitting there being comfortable, like, yeah, right then and there, it feels great. Like, you're just kind of doing your hobbies or whatever, just, like, jerking your time away. But, like, when you know that there's, like, consequences to those actions, like, that's always really upsetting. And, like, you actually... that's a reason why there's a lot of like psychologists that are getting picked up by Western orgs and stuff like that for this exact reason, and why there's and stuff like that. And I also think like there's like kind of like the invisible downside of kind of having too much free time is something we brought up earlier with how teams have too much or are too heavily influenced by what they see on social media. Now imagine if they take that time and instead go to do drills or labs on champions and stuff like that in solo queue. Sure, it's frustrating, but you're not getting this like negative feedback loop through looking at people's opinions and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think just to close out on that point, I do think there is like a, you know, obviously there's an ideal calibration that I don't think anyone's actually nailed yet, but yeah, I really don't see any consistency in the argument of like hard work to the extent that pros practice equals mental unwellness. So I'd love to see what people comment on that, because like it just seems like a really conflicting topic. Like a lot of people seem very offended by that. So.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you see on social media how people complain that pros are playing too much, or you know they need a break, and like especially with what All-Stars coming up too, they're just like, all right, this tournament's useless, so yeah, let's just have them get a break instead. But then when pros do take a break and then they start losing, people start flipping out and they're just like, what
yeah, you can't win. So, and it's like you can't win, and like these breaks, I understand that players need breaks, but these guys aren't in like a fucking coal mine for 16 hours, man. They're like playing games. Like I understand there's the mental stress, but there's a difference. Like I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know how to solve the perception that everyone has, but I think the best idea is to ignore all the fans and do whatever you think is best as an org itself, because
let the coaches do their job, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
If they say you have to play 16 hours a day, well, okay, the player is up to the players, not the fans. So if let's say I will dominate is looking at any LCS pros playing Fortnite, it's like at the end of the day he has no say in what they do in their free time.
Sure.
And
I think the biggest thing is like understanding your teammates' expectations. Like, because this is the big thing for me. Like, I would just if I'm like in the player's shoes, like, and everybody's not practicing to the same degree I am, or vice versa, like that would kind of upset me unless there's open communication about it. You know. Mm-hmm. So from like a selfish versus selfless team perspective, I think that's where it becomes most important. Yeah. And if your team acknowledges that, you know, you're kind of just really talented and you benefit more from this free time, then great. But I don't know. You hear players talking about like 2 years after they left a team, oh, this guy was just slacking. It's like, why wasn't there an open line of communication about that? It's wild.
Yeah, and that too. I think you hear about the Korean teams and how, you know, there's the hierarchy of age, and so, okay, well, if the older guy is putting in all these hours and stuff, then that kind of influences everyone else, and it's just like, well, if that person's practicing this much, I need to practice this much. Yes. And then it becomes this competition, right?
It's another culture thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so, well, if you're in this competition and you're kind of fighting for your spot constantly, especially within Korean teams. And now maybe it's even going towards North American teams because we have academy teams now. So maybe we're going to get into this whole entire grind of, okay, well, this guy's putting in this much effort and everyone's seeing how much effort he's putting into it. Like, I might lose my spot at this point. So it's going to be this arms race, and I'm not sure if that's particularly healthy, but it's going to be the nature of competition itself. And
it's competitive League of Legends. What?
Yeah, it's like you aren't even facing other teams at this point. You're facing your own team, and so when that happens, I think it'll get a little bit more ridiculous. But I do think that teams themselves, at least within North America, and then also when franchising happens in Europe, that there is going to be this arms race of just putting in hours. And once that happens, I think we'll hear more of a outrage. And I don't know how exactly we're going to handle that as an audience. But yeah, like I said, I don't think people should be listening to social media themselves, because the teams know what's best, or the players know what's best, or coaches know what's best. So.
All right, cool. All right, we've gone on for quite a while, so let's get ready to close the show out. It's been fun. I actually haven't been on a LOL show in a while, but it's kind of interesting playing the host role and not pretending I know everything, which is what I did on China Talk. All right, so do you guys have anything to say? Izento, you have any last shout-outs or anything before we get out of here and go back to waiting for the finals and whatever else we do?
IG, baby, all day. You know, they have more Koreans, so that's been my thing this entire tournament. It hasn't worked out, but you know, with Koreans and finals and stuff, so they get that extra buff. You know, although I did see that interview with Rookie and the Shy, and how Rookie was translating. My God, his Chinese is just ridiculous. Like I don't speak Chinese at all, but just
as a Chinese person, I think
that's cool, man. He's been dedicated to staying there, even when other people are jumping ship back over to Korea. It's kind of cool. It's a great story for him.
He's one of those who just really adopted China as a region, so it's really fun. And yeah, well, I'll be here when Fnatic wins. Y'all on Twitter, and I'll be bragging, and yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, cool. Well, is that it?
Yep, that's all.
Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Just follow Esports Heaven on Twitter, and yeah, maybe I'll come back to a show in the future. Who knows? Probably not, but we'll see. All right, deuces.